We already talked about Spinoza, and when we did our kind of like history of philosophy. And curiously, it took a 17th century European Jew to teach me about pantheism. But that's really where felt like I began to get an understanding of what pantheism was about. Growing up Baptist fundamentalist, we would have missionaries come to our church often from India or Southeast Asia, and they would tell these tales of people worshiping idols and monkey-headed gods and elephant-headed gods and worshiping rocks and the river and all these sorts of things. And as a little kid, I just thought, oh, how ignorant. But that changed when I finally read the Upanishads, and I believe the Upanishads were written in about the 7th century AD. And in the Upanishads, it gives a very different understanding of what is going on. This idea that there is, as long as you're having this I-thou relationship or distinction with God, God is external or separate from you. And that last hurdle, that last hoop you have to jump through is that of your own ego. Because your own ego is so tenacious, it is going to want to cling to its illusion it holds on you, that it is the reality, that it is you. But this is part of the Hindu deconstruction, and I'll talk about that later. And I also have a video up, if you want to check it out, called Meditations on the Self, where I talk a lot about Buddhism, Christianity, and Hinduism and their ideas of who the self is. Anyways, this idea in Hinduism is at the core of your being, your very true essence, past all the illusions, past all the roles, past all the relationship, your true self is God. All right, now that is quite something. But we are so resistant to that way of thinking because we have this little g God in us, or this ego, that we confuse with being our true self. And what the Hindu is trying to get you to do through meditation is to deconstruct these false selves. And I love this metaphor of the 1,000-petaled lotus of the heart. And if you can picture this beautiful lotus flower, it looks like a water lily with all these petals opening up, but each petal represents like a relationship or a role. For example, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm an uncle, I'm a teacher, I'm an American, I'm all these different things, but that is not who I am at the core of myself. Those are like incidental things. Anything from my name to my occupation, or things that I do, or relationships that I have. What the Hindu is saying, through yogic meditation, we can deconstruct these layers or these petals one by one until we peel back that last layer, and what we find in the very innermost part of our being is God himself. And that is when true enlightenment can take place. And so in those videos I shared with you on Hinduism, I kind of went through a step-by-step of different roles and aspects of Hinduism. One of the movies I'd like to show this time is called The Little Buddha. And part of why I like The Little Buddha is it takes place between, I believe, northern India and Seattle. And you keep having flashbacks of these Tibetan Buddhist monks in India, northern India, where they were in exile, and then to where they have a little Dharma center in Seattle. And what has happened is one of their high-ranking lamas, which is like an enlightened soul, has passed away, and they're trying to find his reincarnation. And that is an interesting distinction between Hinduism and Buddhism when we get to it. In Hinduism, it's kind of like everyone reincarnates on their own. It's kind of like God has put himself, if we take the analogy of God or Brahman as ocean, God has put himself out into the world, just kind of like water is evaporated, then comes down and it's rain, snow, sleet in the mountains and across the earth. That's kind of how this Hindu view of God is. That Brahman, the sea, the end-all be-all from whence we all come and which we all belong, has posited himself out in all these various multitude of manifestations. But as he does that, it's like a god with amnesia. He forgets that he's become a paramecium, or a rabbit, or a fox, or a human being. And part of this process of enlightenment is to realize our God nature within. And that's actually what Buddha means. It means the enlightened one. It's someone who's understood their godhood, or they've returned to godhood, the godhood of man. So anyways, back to this movie, The Little Buddha. This high-ranking lama, the distinction I was telling you about between Hinduism and Buddhism is Hindus pretty much see us all kind of incarnating in our own individual manifestations, where Buddhism sees it more as like a collective reincarnation, like we're coming back as a group, almost like generational reincarnation. Now, what the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, and the reason he's called the 14th Dalai Lama is because this is the 14th time him and his followers believe he has come back. So this particular iteration of Brahman keeps coming back, and the Dalai Lama has vowed to keep returning until all sentient beings have achieved enlightenment. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to bash Jesus or anything else, but Jesus basically said, my way or the hell way. I'm here to lay down my life for you. If you accept me, you get to go to heaven. If you don't, your sins are upon your own head. Where the Dalai Lama is basically saying, I'm willing to come back again and again and again and again and again until everyone gets off this wheel of samsara. So that's quite something. And I have a lot of respect for the Dalai Lama, but I can guarantee he's coming back again, because there are a lot of people aren't getting off the wheel this time around. Another interesting distinction between Hinduism and Buddhism is this idea of, as we do this deconstruction, we're talking about that thousand-petaled lotus of the heart, and when we get into that core center being, the Hindus see Atman, which is God within. Okay? The Buddhists see Anatman, which means no God within. Right? Any questions, comments on that?